This is Red Ice Radio. From the visible to the obscure. RedIceCreations.com.
This is Red Ice Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren. Welcome, friends, new and regular listeners. We are based out of Sweden, up in Scandinavia, but for the last few programs we've been coming to you from the road. We've crossed over the Atlantic Ocean for a visit to the Pacific Northwest. We're enjoying a stay over here in the United States for a little bit, but of course we'll continue to bring you our radio program. Wherever you are, it's great to have you with us today. It's always an honor to know that you're spending some of your time with us, and it's well worth it as we continue the search for answers to many of the mysteries of this world, and that there still are many people, and I think growing as well, that want to know why we are here, where we come from, and of course where we are going. You can follow us regularly on RedIceCreations.com for much more. Also, thank you for all the kind email. We read it all, and feel free to send us your guest or topic suggestions, or if you have other news articles or tips as well. All the details are on the website. Lloyd is a researcher and author widely known for his best-selling non-fiction book, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and his work with the Star Child skull. Lloyd began writing in 1975. He later became a screenwriter in Hollywood in the 80s, but it wasn't until 1995 that he found his passion, writing non-fiction in the alternative knowledge category. Lloyd's fields of expertise include intervention theory, the origin of life, of human life, of alien reality, and of hominoid reality. Lloyd is with us today to break down the facets of the intervention theory, based on his new ebook called Intervention Theory Essentials. And the theory basically challenges creationism, intelligent design, and evolution by offering a fact-based explanation for how life and humans came to be on Earth, this terraformed protoplanet. Much of what mainstream science professes is simply wrong, often in the face of overwhelming evidence, yet they proceed as nothing. But we are going to detail some of these inconsistencies today, so stay with us for a fascinating program. Welcome back to Red Ice Radio, Lloyd. It's good to talk to you again. How have you been since we last talked back in 2010? I think it was April, if I'm not wrong.
I'm fine, and boy, you would know better than me. I don't keep track of it like that. But if you say so, I'm absolutely going to take your word. And yeah, it's doing good. Things are happening, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you about it.
You bet, exactly. I remember your first. Is it your first book, Everything You Know Is Wrong? It was published back in 1997. It's a big one, a monumental work in terms of detailing and tracking, obviously, the origins of the human race. But that is your first book, isn't it, Lloyd?
Well, no, it wasn't my first book per se. I've written novels before that, but it was my first nonfiction work. Yes, it was, and I've since written a book about the Star Child nonfiction, and now I've written a couple of ebooks. So I work mostly in nonfiction now, but I started off, my first novel was published when I was 31, so that's 24 years ago. 34 years ago. God, I'm getting old. Don't remind me.
The new one here that we're going to talk about and focus on, obviously, is called Intervention Theory Essentials, and this is it's derived from some of the aspects that you do touch upon in Everything You Know Is Wrong. It's released in an ebook format and stuff like that, and we're going to get into some of it. But tell us about some of the background, some of the basics of why you wanted to you've condensed the work a little bit, I guess, and semi-updated it, correct?
Exactly that. In Everything You Know Is Wrong, which came out, as you said, in 1997, a lot of what was in it doesn't change. It was based on what they call deep history, and deep history doesn't really alter. It is what it is, and you make of it what you will. But other aspects of it do change, and did change over time. So in the 15 years or so since that was written, or that was published anyway, there have been a lot of changes and things that we've learned, upgrading in our knowledge, particularly in the area of genetics, but also of cosmology and other areas as well. And I keep up with all of that to the extent that I can. So people have been just bugging me for the last, literally decade, for the last 10 years. When are you going to write another Everything You Know Is Wrong? When is book 2? When are you going to follow up? When, and I just couldn't, because I was so busy sticking with the Star Child, and I just felt that the Star Child needed to come first. But then this new format of ebooks developed, and I did an ebook about the Star Child Skull Essentials, and I like the format so much better than the format of writing in books. You don't have to put as much detail, and you get to use many, many more photos and illustrations, so you make it a lot clearer to people what you're trying to get across. And they have much better retention, I think, from ebooks than they do from regular books, where they're reading, page after page with not that many illustrations or photographs.
Yeah.
But ebooks allow for much more of that. So when I saw that I could do an ebook follow-up, an update to Everything You Know Is Wrong, at least parts of it, I decided to take some time out from the Star Child work, but I had intended it to be only about 150 to 200 pages, ebook pages, and it ended up being 350. So it got away from me a little bit, but there was just so much to say and do. And once I started doing the research of the new evidence and what was available, I just found there were so many things that had changed and were amazing, and all of the new stuff, all of it pointed toward what I had been saying all along in Everything You Know Is Wrong. So all it had done was enhanced my position regarding intervention theory. So I decided to just go ahead and do that ebook to the best degree that I could, and so now I have it and it's out, and I'm really very pleased with it. And it's only been out about a week, and we've had a couple of hundred readers, I think, by now, and they're just knocked out by how clear it is and how informative it is and how much fun it was to read. And it's a very easy format to read and write too, for that matter. It's just fun. It's just a fun reading experience, and that's what I think has attracted the people to it who have already read it, and the ones that are going to read it are going to find that out for themselves. So this new ebook thing, I really honestly don't know if I'm ever going to do another book in these fields, because this ebook format works so well, and it's so instructive, it's so educational. When you finish it, it's in your head so much better than it is in a book that you read, because of all the visual stimulation that you get as well with all the photographs and illustrations. I think it's the wave of the future, and I'm glad that I'm getting on it early.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've heard from other people, they even started to embed some videos and stuff in there, and they can update in a different way, and it's a different approach altogether.
That's another thing, I should have mentioned that. You're right. Not that I have any videos in there, but updating and changing, which I have done with the Star Child book. Now, let me say that. The Star Child ebook, I have already had to update that 4 different times, because we have gotten more new information each time that required a new update of the genetics part of it. As we recover more genetics, I add those and make it as current and up to date as I can every time we get that information. So that's what's great about ebooks. It's a relatively simple, compared to a book, I mean, there's no comparison. It's a relatively simple change to make it as current and as updated as it can be, and that's an exciting aspect of it as well.
Absolutely. The intervention theory is it's always I've always been interested in that theory overall. It's the option that we can begin to look at finally, that goes actually beyond the, if you will, Hegelian dialectic of either God or evolution, you know what I mean? And
or nature, right.
Exactly.
And I go over that in the book. Everyone thinks, and in the new video that we posted last night that you have as well, and people might want to take a look at that. The basics of it are, as you said, it's either God did it or nature did it. It can't be both. There's no room for both. One has to win that argument. And there's never any discussion of a third option. And generally that when two opposed views are so diametrically opposed as the God versus nature argument is, that neither one of them can be right, because if both of them can stand there and slug it out year after year after year, it's obvious that neither one of them is 100% right, because if they were, there wouldn't be an argument. So there has to be a middle ground. The truth has to lie in the middle ground somewhere else than these two positions, God and nature. So where might that be? That is what intervention theory is. Intervention theory provides a viable third option for how the origins of everything begins. God didn't do it. Nature didn't do it. What intervention theory says is, as I say in the book and in the video, they did it. Capital T-H-E-Y. They did it. And then you say, well, okay, what are they? Who are they? They, people call them aliens. They call them EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, whatever you want to call them. I choose to call them in the ebook terraformers. I call them terraformers, and everything you know is wrong as well. Because to me, Sitchin and others, and myself included, I think Sitchin's work with the Sumerian text is excellent. But it focuses on how we came to be, who created us, who created humans. And the arguments that are made in Sitchin's work for the Sumerians being the hands that guided that creation, I really buy into that. I think that has a very good chance of being the truth. But what I see, what my research has turned up over the years, is that the earth itself has been terraformed to support life from the very beginning, as it began to coalesce out of the primordial cloud of dust and gas that has been theorized to be how all of the planets in the solar system, and not just in our solar system but everywhere, come to be. Swirling clouds of dust and gas, and those things aggregate and form planets and moons and other astral bodies and suns, and you have a solar system. Well, as ours was forming from the time it began to form at 4.5 billion years ago, from not too long after that, Earth, I believe, from everything I can see, is being terraformed, is being deliberately built to support life, to support advanced life, to support complex life. And when you look at what is required for that to happen, everything that's needed, just when it's needed, is supplied in exactly the right way, exactly the right stuff to make it all work, to make a terraforming project work. The mind-boggling thing about it is that we're talking about 4.5 billion years, billion with a B. That is a long time. So these terraformers, whoever they are, and I say this in the books, they have no concept of time as we understand it. There is no time for them. Time is meaningless to them, whoever they are, whatever they are. They seem to have a plan to terraform our planet, and they carry it out. And whenever there's a catastrophe, as catastrophes occur on the planet, we have very clear records of 5 major ones and several minor ones. They come in not too long thereafter, a few hundred to a few thousand years, and they resupply. They resupply the planet with whatever the new atmosphere can tolerate, can accept. And when you look at the records, it's all there, and that's what I've laid out. So I got so many questions about that from everything you know is wrong, people wanting to know more about the idea and more about the details of the idea. In everything you know is wrong, I thought people were going to be much more interested in the hominoid part of it and the human, the creation of humans part of it. So in everything you know is wrong, the beginning of everything, the beginning of the solar system, life, and all that, is not what I spend the most time and energy and effort on. But it turned out that in short changing sort of that aspect of it, that brought the most questions. So people wanted to know more. So I spent a lot of time in this ebook clearing a lot of those aspects of it up, and I think all to the good. I think it came out very well.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, the obviously we need to talk a little bit about the terraformers and all that, because at one point or another, we're still stuck with this question, Lloyd, obviously, of where they come from, and we're still kind of,
exactly.
Even if they created us, we've talked about this in the past, we haven't solved the equation, but if we look at it from the point of view of our life on this planet, we can potentially begin to break down some of these and go further and further back into the record to try to understand, but as you said, the interventionists in this case, the ET, the ancient aliens, or the Anunnaki, some call them, or you call them the terraformers. If we backtrack on that as well, then we're not talking about only the human species, but the origins of all life on the planet and the planet itself. The question is this proto-planet that you mentioned. Do you think that has been even positioned? There are some argumentation points here that even the solar system, the structure of that, actually has a design plan behind it. Do you go that far as well, Lloyd?
No, I don't go that far. I think the moon is very likely put there and put where it is to assist in the development of higher life, because without the moon being where it is, exactly what it is, the way it is, we couldn't have the level of life that we have on the planet. So I think there's an argument for the moon being a construct, an artificial construct. I don't think the rest of the planets in the solar system are that way. I think that's too big a job. But I do say that there might well have been another planet where the asteroid belt is, because of Bode's law, and it just seems to indicate, the physics of it seem to indicate that there should be a planet there, even if it's a small one like Mars, smaller than Earth, that blew up. And that could, the history, we are so far behind in understanding the reality of our solar system, of our planet, of life on our planet, that honestly, as you and I sit here talking right now, we are every bit as ignorant in relation to the truth as were the people 300-400 years ago who were absolutely convinced that the earth was flat and it was the center of everything that they could see in the sky.
Yeah.
They believed they had no knowledge to indicate otherwise to them, so they were utterly convinced that they were right. Well, that's how our scientists are today. They will not let information in that contradicts their current opinion that their earth is flat and their earth is the center of, or their knowledge base is the center of everything. But in reality, we're as ignorant today of the real truth of it, the real reality, as those people were 300-400 years ago. And people 100 years from now, just because things move so fast, people 100 years from now, 150 years from now, are going to look back on us and think that we are just laugh at how stupid and silly and egocentric we are.
Well, I hope we move on, Lloyd, because we think we have everything figured out right now, don't we?
That's part of what I'm trying to do. Yeah. At least move us to the next rung on the ladder. I'm not saying I can get us to the end. Obviously, that can't happen. But we do need to go a step up on the real ladder toward truth, and some of the things that have to be done in order to move us to that next rung is we have to drop gravity as the cohesive force in the universe, because that's all wrong. We have to drop that life began here spontaneously when a lightning bolt hit a warm pond or a warm pool of water with the building blocks of life, and just all these ridiculous fairy tales. That's all they are, really. They're just fairy tales for kindergartners that mainstream science tells us and teaches us and insists that we believe, and insists that, that we teach our children to believe, because they don't want to do the hard work of saying, we really don't understand this at all, and we need to go back to square one and figure it out. They don't want to do that. And I don't blame them. If I was in their position, if I was in a position of authority and power like their leaders are, I wouldn't want the whole thing overturned on my watch. I wouldn't want the apple cart overturned on my watch. I'd want to keep things the way they are and let the poor dumb schmuck who comes behind me have to deal with the overturn of the apple cart. You know what I mean? And each one of them feels that way. So they suppress the truth every way they can and just hope that it just doesn't jump up and bite them on the butt while they're in charge. And so that those of us who are out doing the work that we do, and I include, you guys in this because you get the word out that from researchers like me, it's up to us. It's just a fight. It's just a dog fight. It's a battle. And we have to maintain an understanding that it's done out of, personal interests on their part. Not that they don't understand the truth, not that they don't know the truth. It's just that if they admit it, they've got to change their way of life. They've got to change their whole belief system. They've got to change their textbooks. So there are a number of truths that I go over in the book that I think have to be done away with. The lies that we're told and the lies that we believe have to be done away with, and we have to accept some new truths and some new realities before we can step up to the next rung on the ladder toward the truth. And then we get there, then somebody else, knowing what they can see at that next rung on the ladder, you get a whole new view of the horizon of knowledge. And from what they can see there, people like me and Sitchin and the others who do this work will see a new horizon and then bring people to the next step up. And, there may be 5 more steps, there may be 10, there may be 20 before we get to actual real understanding of reality, so that we can jump on spaceships and go around and do the incredible things that the people on UFOs, do. Yeah. They just, completely overcome gravity, travel at incredible mind-bending speeds that we can't even comprehend, and all the things that they are capable of doing. We'll either learn how to do that, or those that are watching and overseeing us will come to a decision that, hey, they have moved far enough now, it's time for us to give them a hand, and we'll get some help. But we're not going to get any help as long as we are the ignorant bullies that we are now. I don't see that happening. Yeah. Why would they bother with us? We're like lab rats compared to them. So why would they bother? We have to figure it out for ourselves. We will not get any help till we reach a certain level of maturity as a species. And I really believe that we're the equivalent of, just snotty-nosed kindergartners relative to where we need to be before they're going to bother with us. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I mean, we have to step it up and kind of, if you will, take the responsibility of growing up a little bit, basically, because if they out there, truly are wise and kind, and if in that sense even caring for mankind, I think they would do a disservice to actually step in at this point, Lloyd, and actually offer. The relationship that would develop would be too much of a parent-kid kind of relationship, right? And we would have no incentive or even reason to try harder. We would just look at them and say, help us out, mommy and daddy, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I see it different than that. I think they look at us and they think, if we give them any help right now about, physics or anything, all they're going to do is try to weaponize it to kill each other. Yeah, they're not going to use it the way we intend for them to use it. They're not mature enough. They're not old enough. They're not capable of dealing with power. We can't give them power. Yeah. Beyond oil, beyond nuclear power. I mean, look how poorly we handle nuclear power. Look how poorly we handle the energy that we have. Yeah. So what if they were to give us limitless energy? Just limitless, free. Teach us how to tap into the great electrified plasma that's out there. We know it's there. I mean, we know Tesla was fooling around with it. I mean, we know it's there, but our oil people don't want us to tap into it. They don't want us to learn how to use water, hydrogen, any of the major possibilities of alternative fuels. So why would aliens dare to give us anything at all that we could turn into a weapon? Yeah. Because that's exactly what we do. There would be no, well, now we're going to get you to sign a contract here where you won't turn it into a weapon. And ridiculous. The first thing we'll do is have some black op thing where they're hiding it as best they can, turning it into a weapon. I wouldn't trust this for a moment. And I think the aliens, if they're aliens, if they're smart enough to be that, they're not going to trust us. So we've got to grow up. We've got to mature. And part of that growing up and maturing process is accepting some truths about ourselves that are uncomfortable to accept. And the major truth there is that we are a genetically engineered species that wouldn't be here at all if somebody hadn't decided to create us. And furthermore, that in the creating process, because they didn't really care, they were building a slave and a servant, and they didn't really care about the quality of the product, we are very, screwed up. We have over 4,000 genetic disorders. Most people aren't aware of that, but we have over 4,000 genetic disorders and counting. That's not a normal, natural amount for a species, because nature tends to weed out genetic flaws. Those flaws are in there because we were being created on a schedule. Get it as fast as you can. The normal rule is, for us, normally it's better get it right than get it fast. Take your time, get it right. That wasn't how it was apparently when we were being built. It was, doesn't matter how screwed up they are, doesn't matter if 1 in 100 are faulty, it doesn't matter if 1 in 10 are faulty, get it for us as soon as you can. And so we were created after, I might add, a great deal of trial and error if you go by the Sumerian texts. So all that trial and error, the damage created during the trial and error to create us, they left. They didn't go in and fix. And so that's why I think we carry so many of those genetic disorders.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if we go back again then and talk about the construction or how the planet was basically terraformed in the early stages, that means a lot of work and a lot of effort obviously went into that. And the question is who that was for. Was that for us? Was it for them? Was it for all the other species out there? There's a number of theories about that.
Well, and it's a very good point. I don't think that the beings, whatever they are, that terraformed the Earth from the beginning, from 4.5 billion years ago, I don't think they are the same as the Anunnaki at all. Okay. I think the Anunnaki are a sub-level way, way, way under them. The Anunnaki, to me, are like us a couple thousand years from now, maybe a few thousand years from now. They're us at a different level of sophistication, but they still have not worked out a lot of their problems, a lot of their social interaction problems. I mean, those guys were warring among themselves very regularly in the way that we do. A lot of our worst characteristics seem to come from them, or we certainly act out a lot of the way that they behave.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they made us on their template. We shall make the Adamu after, in our own image, after our own likeness, which comes down in the Bible, but was in fact written first in one of the Sumerian texts. So we are a prototype model of them, but dumbed down, made very much more stupid than them, and made genetically with a lot of faults that they probably don't have. But still, we've got a lot of their emotional miswiring, which makes us warlike and all of the other things that we do that are so reprehensible. We're an interesting mix, of Mother Teresa and Cheney and Bush, people like that.
Right.
I mean, those are Saddam Hussein. I mean, let's be fair, or the
Stalin, or there's a number
Stalin
of people out there.
You have all, you have that mix within us.
Yeah.
Of the good and the bad, and all of us have those capabilities. All of us have even Hitler, was supposedly nice to animals and kids, and yet he was Hitler, and I'm sure you could find good things to say about Saddam Hussein, or maybe even Cheney or Bush. Who knows? Maybe there's good things to say. I shouldn't be bringing them up because it's really not fair to pick out any particular politician. I think they're all
it's
pretty much
a human condition in that sense. It's prevalent across the board.
If you get to that level of success as a politician, you're more or less you're more or less worthless to begin with. So anyway. But that's getting off track of this.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point, because it goes back to that idea of just trying to battle the human condition, why we have so many problems, why things are messed up. Because again, if we go back to this idea, if this has been a plan to begin with, a very detailed, fine, beautifully executed plan, it's almost like, well, I'm not saying that the human experience per se is a mistake, but the genetics of it, there seems to lack in that sense. But for a moment then, just let's backtrack a bit, because I want to ask you about one interesting aspect that you bring up about the protoplanet and the introduction of anaerobic, I think it's called, organisms, right? And the creation, basically, of oxygen. Tell us about that, Lloyd.
Yeah, it's really, really, boy, one of the most interesting things, and I'm already getting a lot of great feedback from people who are saying, I had no idea about this. But when the planet was first forming, congealing, when it was a protoplanet, it wasn't even a planet. It was just a glob of basically lava, of just scalding, seething. You've seen films of lava oozing along. Imagine a whole planet like that. That's all it was. And it had to go through space, through the cooling of space, the frigid temperatures of space, to begin to sort of cool off and develop a crust. And that took literally millions, hundreds of thousands and millions of years. So by about 4 billion years ago, where you've got for like 500 million years, it's in that phase of pulling into a ball and making the beginnings of a protoplanet, but it's still just a seething ball of lava. Into that mass comes prokaryotic bacteria. And what science, of course, used to say was that life couldn't have formed until it had all cooled off and it was water, and lightning bolts could hit the water and life could form there. They still teach that, even though they know perfectly well, nothing like that happened at all.
Yeah.
The prokaryotes came at around, they began to show up in the fossil record around 3.8 billion years ago with the first rocks. There are what seem to be fossils of prokaryotic bacteria. Certainly by 3.5 billion years ago, there's no doubt about it. But the assumption is they were there probably since 4 billion years ago, or maybe before. But they couldn't leave traces because the lava was still just lava. But the thing is, these prokaryotic bacteria are indestructible. They, even to this day, there are what are called extremophiles, and there are prokaryotic bacteria that can live in anything. You throw them in the worst environments you can imagine. Heat, salt, methane, sulfur, doesn't matter. There are some within that group that can make their way there and thrive. So if you were going to terraform a seething protoplanet, and not just one. Imagine that this must go on hundreds and thousands of places around the galaxy, and then all the other galaxies out there. This looks like a program to take a burgeoning solar system where you can't know in the beginning which planets are going to end up in the zone of life. So you probably sprinkle these prokaryotic bacteria on all of them, and you wait to see when the orbits stabilize which one is in the zone of life and which one isn't. Turns out that Earth was in the zone of life for here, as we understand the zone of life, and that may not even work on other places, but for here, that's how it seems to have worked. So our prokaryotic bacteria did what prokaryotic bacteria are going to do on every planet that they're put on. They are anaerobic, meaning they don't need oxygen. But in their life processes, as they live and die and live and die and live and die, they are producing oxygen. Now, what is the important part of oxygen? It is needed for a protoplanet to tie up the free iron, because iron, everyone agrees, is one of the most abundant elements out there. Everywhere they look, they can find traces of iron. Iron is out there. It's a major part of everything. So as Earth was forming, it had an awful lot of free iron there. And what is iron reactive with? What is it most reactive with? Oxygen. You stick any iron bar out anywhere, in just a few days it's coated in rust. Iron is very, very reactive with oxygen. So what you have to do to make a planet stable so that you can begin to build an environment on it is you've got to tie up all that free iron, and you have to do it with oxygen. And so to do that, you have to put creatures on the planet that can create oxygen while living without it. That is what the prokaryotes did for about 2 billion years. 2 billion years of this.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I know. And then at the end of that, where they've got most of the free iron tied up and turned into rust. Now they're getting some oxygen moving into the water where it can support something that needs oxygen to live. And so you get a whole nother group of these single-celled bacteria, but much, much more sophisticated and much, much bigger. Eukaryotes coming around 2 billion years ago. But you would think that the prokaryotes, let's step back to them for a minute, you would think that because they're the first life form on Earth, the way we've all been taught, start as one single simple thing that then evolved by Darwinian evolution to become many other things. Well, the reality of it is those prokaryotes, there were two complete, distinct, unique groups of them. Not two different kinds like a single kind, but groups of them. Apples and oranges, just totally different. Two different kinds come, prokaryotes. And then the eukaryotes came, much bigger, and the prokaryotes have their DNA floating around loose inside their bodies, whereas the eukaryotes have their DNA in a cell nucleus. And everything after has that design of the cell nucleus. You and I, all of us, we are eukaryotic creatures. Everything, plants and animals, if you've got your DNA in a cell that has a nucleus, are eukaryotes. So there's the prokaryotes from the very beginning, and they're still with us, by the way, playing all over the place. The largest amount of biomass that we have are the bacteria. And then the eukaryotes. And so now the eukaryotes accelerate the building of the oxygen, because now step 2 is once you tie up all the free iron, you have to build an atmosphere. You have to build an atmosphere that has oxygen in it, or you're not going to have higher life forms.
That's right.
And then what's the important part of that? You have to build an ozone layer. You have to build an ozone layer to shield out the sun's most deadly rays, or you can't have life grow on the surface of the earth, on the surface of the planet, or the surface of the water. And remember, all life was in the water at first. There was nothing up on the land because the sun was killing it. But once the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes working together, prokaryotes from about 4 billion years ago to about 2 billion years ago by themselves, and then the eukaryotes come at about 2 billion years, and then for another 1.5 billion until about 500,000 years ago, 500 million, I said 500,000,
right,
about 500 million years ago, 500 million years ago. And then the earth is now, the air and the water is saturated with enough to really start accepting really complex life. And so you get the Ediacaran biota for 50 million years. They're just fill the seas. Not on land yet, fill the seas, Ediacaran biota. And then at about 550 million years ago, you have this incredible event, the Cambrian explosion, which Darwinists don't even try to explain, because there's just no way to say that was evolution at work, because it all just came, relatively speaking, overnight. Whether it was a few thousand years it occurred, or 1 million years, or some try to insist it was 10 million years, doesn't matter how long it took. You had this incredible dumping of whole life forms onto the earth, into the water, and there were males and females, predators and prey, very large ones, very small ones, the whole gamut. Nearly all of the animal phyla that we have today are represented in the Cambrian explosion. They all come overnight, the whole thing. And what do they look like? Go look at pictures of them. All you got to do is pull them up and look. They look like they come from another planet.
Yeah,
they
that's
don't
right.
look anything like here. Well, they did come from other planets. That's why they look like they come from another planet. There were other planets out there where life forms had been created, and all the terraformers did was they came, they took some readings of the water, readings of the air, and they said, okay, we're ready now for this. Bring us this, or let's go get this, or however it was created. And then we got it. And then when you read through the ebook, you see very clearly how it unfolds, and you can't say anything but, boy, that really makes sense, and it does. I mean, it absolutely does. Earth was being terraformed, no doubt about it. All this stuff about evolution, it's just a fairy tale that they put out to keep people thinking in simplistic terms so that they don't feel like they have to bother with learning anything more about it. Well, I know how life occurred, and that's it, and I don't have to worry about it. I'll worry about other things. I'll worry about being a consumer or whatever. But this is really how it had to happen. When you look back at the evidence, I think it's overwhelming, and I think most people that take the time to read the book are going to come to the same same conclusion. I don't see how you can come to any other.
So much to discuss in terms of that, but what about the red planet Mars? That seems to be potentially maybe a failed attempt of this trying to free the iron into iron oxide, right? But it's still the red planet, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly it. In other words, like I said, I think the terraformers, when they came, they put the prokaryotes everywhere, on every planet, because they wouldn't know in the beginning which ones were going to fall within the zone of life. So Mars got a dose of them, and because they can live in any environment, I'm confident that on Mars there are going to be some forms of living bacteria. Their form of it, whatever it is going to be there. I'm very confident. There's some evidence to indicate that it might be true, but
they've been talking for years, haven't they? About
there's all that debate. That it looks very much like there are fossils, but of course scientists don't want to acknowledge that possibility, so they've found ways to talk themselves out of believing it. But they sure do look like fossil chains. They look very, very much like cyanobacteria to me. So we're going to have to wait for confirmation. But I believe that all planets got their dose of prokaryotic bacteria from the beginning, and the ones where they could take root and develop a planet that could accept higher life forms. I think in our solar system the only one was Earth, and so they went about fixing Earth so that it would support higher life as it does today.
We've had major explosions of life, as you mentioned, as the Cambrian explosion, but there's also been, from that point, major extinction events that seems to happen over and over again. What do you think that's about? Is that from the designer's point of view as well? What do you think?
No, I think those are just exactly what the word implies. They are catastrophes. They are things that happen that the terraformers, I don't think the terraformers sit here and watch over us all the time. I think we're on a kind of a schedule of visits, and they know, it might be a circuit like a paper route or something, and they come back every so often to see how we're doing, and they make adjustments. And so when catastrophes occur, I think those are caused by, really giant asteroids or something like that, striking the surface of the Earth and just wiping out either anywhere. The large five, the big five, have taken out anywhere from 50 to 90% of all the life forms that were on the Earth at the time. 50 to 90%. And then the smaller catastrophes are less than 50. And I mean, it's hard to say a small catastrophe taking out less than 50% of the life forms. Yeah. That's how they classify them. But I think personally that in almost every case, I think it's from a collision with some other astral body that's out there, because they're floating around. I mean, there's no doubt we've got an asteroid belt. I don't know that we have an Oort cloud or not. Maybe we do, but there's plenty of bullets out there floating around that could hit us, and in the past have, because we can see the scars on the skin, on the surface of the Earth, Meteor Crater, if you've ever been there, and some of the others that are well known. It's clear that it happens. The one that took out the dinosaurs, you still hear arguments about that, but I think most people agree that was caused by an asteroid hitting on the Yucatan Peninsula. So these disasters do occur, and so the next time the terraformers come around and they see, wow, it's like coming home and seeing your house burn down, we're going to have to see what we got left here. What do we have left? And they'll check and they'll see what the new environment is. And because, each one, there's a different environment after it occurs. And they say, okay, well, we can bring this in now. And so they do. And then they let it spin off from there. Now, you have, what do they bring? They bring what I call in the book stock species. And I think stock species are ones that have the ability to branch off other forms of those species, not in the sense of macroevolution, the way Darwinists say, the way, the way evolution says it happens with slow, gradual mutational change, making gradually one species somehow turn into another species. I think that's been proven wrong. That was proven wrong 15 years after Darwin did his thing. If you go back and look at the research, it was clear that it was wrong, but it was also equally clear within the 10 or 15 years after he published that it had driven the ruling religious elite into a second place role in the way people were looking at it. So once science understood that they had been put in the catbird seat by Darwin's book, even when it began to be clear that he was wrong, that there was no such thing as macroevolution, and Darwin himself said, if you can't find the intermediate species, I can't find them, and if nobody, I'm assuming that they can be found, but if they're not, then my theory has to be wrong. Well, that's what the missing links are all about. There are no missing links. They can't find them. They've been looking 150 years and they can't find any. They say they do, but they're lying every time. Just read the book Icons of Evolution if you want to see the size and the scale of the lies that they concoct. And I talk about that in the book, in the ebook. So anyway, it just comes to a kind of a grinding halt when you try to make the reality of life on Earth fit the Darwinian paradigm. It really doesn't work. There is no macroevolution, but there is microevolution, and that's what Darwin saw. Darwin saw changes in the beaks of finches so that while they're still finches, they're distinct species of finches. And he saw it with the shells of tortoises. While they're still tortoises, very similar to the stock species tortoise that created giant tortoises, there were dramatic changes in their shells depending on whether they browsed on low foliage or high foliage. So, it's clear that microevolution works and exists to create some new species. But in the beginning, I think Earth is delivered of loads of stock species that from then find their niches and branch off the way the finches did, the tortoises, and many others. But don't include domesticated plants and animals with any of that. There's natural species and there's domesticated plants and animals. Natural species are part and parcel of that terraforming program, I believe. The domesticated plants and animals are specifically engineered, I think, by the Anunnaki. Whoever created us created the domesticated plants and animals at the same time. According to the Sumerian texts, it was, quote, to give the gods, the multiple gods, to give the gods their ease, meaning to make this planet more home-like to them than it was when they got here. I mean, this planet Earth, this sojourn that these Anunnaki had to endure here for many thousands of years, it had to be the equivalent of what in the military you would call hardship duty. And so they had to do some things to make this place livable for them, or more livable for them. One of the things they needed at the top of the list would be slaves and servants to do their bidding and their work, which that's why they created us. But also they're going to need food that they're used to and that they're like. They're going to need animals that they're used to and that they, like and can use. And so that's where the domesticated plants and the domesticated animals came from. The Anunnaki looked around, they saw what was here, and then they started genetically manipulating it to make it more into what they wanted it to be. And if you look across all of that at the scale of the program, the way Sitchin lays it out and the way I discuss it in Everything You Know Is Wrong, it just really makes sense. It really makes sense. The evidence is there for it. And again, the mainstream is not going to jump on this because it means just a complete overturn of the apple cart of their reality. But over time, there's no getting around it. I mean, there's just no way for them to avoid it. If we're going to move toward the truth, if we're not wiped out by a catastrophe like others have been, that's going to happen. Everything, that's why I called my book Everything You Know Is Wrong. Everything that they are professing to be fundamental baseline beliefs are just wrong. They are just wrong. And it's going to prove out that that's true. And we'll, maybe not us so much, but certainly our kids and our grandkids for sure are going to live in a world with an entirely different set of realities than we all live under, which is kind of the way it is with what our parents and our grandparents lived under. That's the way it is, the way it works, the flow of time.
That's right. I certainly hope so, that we manage to move on, as it were, in that sense, and actually figure some of this stuff, because there's a lot of questions out there, a lot of things that are, remaining untouched, as it were, and for good reason, just as you just laid out, that will be too upsetting at this stage, and things are too orderly at this stage. So many questions that they, not are willing to address or answer, or basically just, deny it. But obviously, we're kind of working our way up here towards the human, the creation of the humans. Obviously, we need to address the hominids, and I want to do that in the next segment with you, Lloyd. And before then we wrap things up, let's talk a bit more about the book and how it's available and so forth. It's called Intervention Theory Essential. It's an ebook. It's available on lloydpie.com, your website, and it's for download right there then, correct? And Kindle versions
right.
as well?
Let's get my name right for those who've never heard of me. It's Lloyd, L-L-O-Y-D, 2 L's, L-L-O-Y-D, P as in Paul, Y-E, P-Y-E, lloydpie.com. If you go to that, and right on the homepage, you'll see a picture, Intervention Theory Essentials, of the cover. Just click on that, and it'll take you to the page where you can download a free sample, 20 pages, first 20 pages, free sample, no problem, no questions asked, and that will give you a very good look at and a very good sense of what the book is about, how it's laid out, how it reads, and it also covers the whole thing about cosmology, the beginning, and why gravity is not the force that holds the universe together. So just in and of itself, the free sample is well worth reading. And then you can, if you want to get the whole book, you can purchase it there, and you can get a high-res version for if you're going to read it on a computer or a laptop. You can get a Kindle version. We're working on an EPUB version for Nooks and Kobos and others like that. That's harder to create than the one for Kindle was, and then of course there's a low res version if you just want that for an iPad or something like that. Or what you can get whatever you think you want, except we don't have an EPUB yet for Nooks and the others. But most people have Kindles, and so Kindles are covered, and certainly if you have a computer or a laptop, get the high-res version because the illustrations and photographs are beautiful at that level.
Excellent. And, the Ancient Alien series that was running recently was tremendously popular. I've heard from people who previously never been interested in these kinds of subjects always, come up and talk to me now about this series, So I think it's perfect for a friend or someone who's interested in getting some of the basics, basically, of backtracking on that theory alone, So I think
if you want to, that's what it's meant to be. That's why it's called, essentials. It's just the essential stuff you need to know. I should also say it's 350 pages, but it's ebook pages, so they're much easier to read and get through. It's over 230 photographs and illustrations, so that it's very much show and tell. It's very easy to understand what's going on at every step of the way. And it's 40,000 words, so it takes the average reader about 3 hours. I mean, and people, and I say that very clearly up front in the book and on the webpage, and people are saying, it really did take me about 3 hours to read. So it'll take you about 3 hours, but as I say in the book and as I say in the video, those 3 hours will rock your worldview, will change your worldview. I can guarantee it. It's truly an amazing experience, and I'm not just saying that because I created it. I'm saying it because I'm listening to the feedback from people who have got it and read it in the last week.
lloydpie.com, that's the website. We will have the links up on redicecreations.com.